Now, if we think about forgiveness, I kind of call it the F word. Always like, am I going to use the F word or not? And I'm like, not the fuck word that we talked about before, but the forgiveness word, because it really does have this similar connotation. Oh, this is a bad word. Oh, we're not supposed to be using this. Forgiveness belongs in the spiritual realms, not in the psychotherapy worlds. You're not supposed to talk about forgiveness. And I really understand some of that. There's so much in culture, in society, in social media that pushes forgiveness prematurely. So I understand the hesitation and the reluctance for therapists or coaches or whatever kind of health worker you are, or for your own personal experience, how forgiveness can has this kind of reputation of being something we need to be careful and guarded and cautious about. So I'm very aware of this. Never, Brian, in a million years did I think I would be talking about forgiveness in my workshops. It was never anything that I put a lot of stock in other than, oh my goodness, now we're going to traumatize me. Now we're going to bring up my trauma history. Because I used to go to, I grew up Catholic and was in conversion therapy as a very young kid and went to confession, right? And this idea of forced, you know, repentance and forgiveness was just so thrust upon me in my own experience. Like, I didn't mean anything to me. It had no weight. Go into this room with a total stranger, make up five sins that you did because you couldn't be honest at all as a kid, for me. And then you get this forgiveness bestowed upon you from this person. Now, I understand those people who are Catholic or Protestant or whatever their religion is, that that is not the way it is for everyone. I totally understand that. I'm talking about my personal experience as a young kid and how forgiveness was introduced to me in a way that didn't resonate and didn't feel authentic for me. So I've always had this cautious, guarded experience around forgiveness. The other thing I'll say, because of my trauma history, was there was a lot of defensiveness and guardedness in my family of origin. So admitting, being the vulnerability of admitting I'm wrong, I'm sorry, was not a part of my culture growing up at all. So I never heard my parents say, I'm wrong, I made a mistake, I'm sorry. And I never learned to have any kind of experience of that. And that is very common for trauma survivors. Okay. One of the hallmark issues of trauma is when the people that harm us don't take responsibility for their actions, we assign responsibility to ourselves. This happens over and over and over again in complex or relational trauma. So I never had parents that took responsibility for what they did. So I never learned how to do that. And I never learned about the value of forgiveness in regards to deepening the authenticity and connection in relationship, because that's what it could do versus it's this scary, awful thing that we have to avoid at all costs. I want to just share a little bit around, and I'll talk about my journey, because really my forgiveness journey, I'm going to say, Brian, started with the passing of my father, honestly, because that's where, I was one of these people, folks. I'm a therapy lifer. I'm going to try to change that. I don't think everybody needs to be in therapy for 50 years in order for them to heal their trauma. I've been in therapy for 35 plus years, long, long time. And I've done a ton of healing. And I've always had this like, I felt better. I expanded my life. My view got better. I was happier. A lot of benefits occurred for me as a result of my healing my trauma. And there was always this missing piece, which I never understood until the passing of my father, where I kind of was compelled by forces, honestly, that were way beyond my awareness of offering love and forgiveness to someone who was brutally harmful to me. Before my dad died, like probably 3 months before he died, I just had this idea in my head that I was going to give him a beautiful send off and a beautiful funeral. I had no idea what that was about. It didn't even make any logical sense to me, but I had a, a powerful message that I was going to send him off with honor and love. And at that point, it wasn't like we even had a great relationship, and I didn't understand why I felt the need to do that. But it just was something that was part of my journey. And I was so fortunate to be able to have the experience of mutual love and forgiveness as a gift to me during the passing of my father, the transition for him, that I understand many people don't experience. Some of us are fortunate enough to have those moments of forgiveness with the person. Some people can have that experience of forgiveness while they're not even in interaction with the person. Like you can do forgiving without the person being in front of you or exchanging contact with them. So there's many different ways this can happen privately, in relationship, while they're alive, after they've gone. Forgiveness has a lot of dimensions to it. Now, before we dive into that, I want to talk a little bit about trauma and a little bit about um, resilience, because that's one of the things that I've learned about the building of resilience through forgiveness, interestingly enough. And I don't know that many people put those two topics together, but I certainly have learned to do that. So, oh my goodness, any podcast I ever do, Brian, it's like, what's the definition of trauma? What is trauma? Because it's such a buzzword these days. I kind of say, if you're a baby boomer, and I'm saying that because my damn kids told me that I am, I'm like the last 2 years of a baby boomer. So I'm a baby boomer. If you're in that demographic, many of you might be in that demographic, there's this allergy to trauma. I don't have trauma. I'm tough and strong. We, walked 5 miles in the snow with no shoes. We were tough and strong. We're not we don't have trauma, right? And if you're like a Gen Z or a Gen Alpha, it's kind of like, oh my gosh, I've sneezed. I have a trauma history and PTSD, right? Kind of depends on what demographic, what cultural time frame you live in around how you carry trauma and what it means over and underused. I see trauma as beyond our human capacity to handle. I ask people, have you ever had an overwhelming life experience? Everybody says yes to that. And they'll even say, no, I don't have a trauma history, but of course I have overwhelming life experience. It's kind of an easier, more palatable way to think about trauma, an overwhelming life experience. And I, Brian, separate what happened to you versus how you perceive it and how you respond to it. Because what happens to you and how you perceive it are vastly different within families. My brother, who also has a trauma history, is an avid hunter, and he'll shoot anything that doesn't shoot him first. I become a damn trauma expert, right? Two similar experiences with very different perceptions and adaptations, what you do with it. I also think about frequency, intensity, and duration when I'm thinking about trauma. I had the pleasure of working with Nadine Burke-Harris recently. She's a Surgeon General, or what, former Surgeon General of California, working on the ACE studies, the number of traumas and the number of problems that they cause in the medical community as a result of that. So frequency, intensity, and duration are important. And look at this list, just keeps growing and growing and growing for me. What are your range of traumas? And I'm not going to go through all of them in depth, but I do talk about these in the course. Different types of trauma affect us differently and need to be treated differently. All traumas are not created equal, and they shouldn't be. And each person doesn't experience them the same. So adding the dimension of spirituality to our work, for me, is very important because we have certain limitations with what the field of psychotherapy allows. And many trauma survivors will absorb the energy of trauma and absorb the energy of, I'm going to say, misaligned emotion that doesn't belong to them. And so we need to be able to access other ways to release this energy of trauma that doesn't belong to the people that carry it. It's one of the hallmark things for me is trauma is energy that doesn't belong to us, and it can be released. I don't care how traumatized you are, how long you've been traumatized. I want people to know release is possible. These are a list of different types of trauma, and my list keeps growing as we get more awareness of what's happening in the world. Resilience as a result of trauma. I just want to talk a little bit about this for a moment because, in fact, the more we move toward trauma, the more we are learning from our difficult moments, the more resilience that gets created within the individual. The more we push away our trauma, the more we tend to recreate and replicate it. And that's kind of what happens. Like it or not, I was one of these people, I used to say, I was on rinse and repeat for many, many years. I'd be in a relationship, it wasn't good. I ended the relationship, I started a new one. It wasn't good in a very different way. I ended that relationship and started again. I was kind of on this rinse and repeat cycle. And it wasn't until I started really dealing with the emotional and physical somatic aspects of trauma that I started gaining a resilience in me that was different than what I had and was born with, because I see resilience as temperament, as what we're born with. Certain people have that thing, that it factor. I often would say, why did I, with my trauma history, go to Harvard when other people with the same trauma history or similar or worse end up on the streets shooting heroin, right? There's this inherent temperament that creates some resilience and as Angela Duckworth tells us, resilience can be cultivated and built. And I believe that healing trauma and going through the process of forgiveness helps create more resilience. These are some of the things I think about when I think about resilience. Can people form a meaningful connection? And folks, when you're listening to this, think about yourself as it relates to this. Like where do you rate on the resilience scale, right? Can you form a meaningful connection? Can you tolerate uncertainty? How comfortable are you with difficult emotions? Are you willing or capable of learning from difficult moments? Can you see or value others outside of yourself? Oh my goodness, folks, if we did this, the world would be a different place. If we collectively have the capacity to see the other person's point of view, we would not be in the global and political divisiveness that we are today.
Frank, are
And
you listening to your clients for these also?
am I
Can they
listening?
form
Oh, totally, Brian.
a...
When I'm sitting with somebody, I'm assessing their resilience when I'm going through this list. This is a list that I use, right? I was like, I want to see, like, if I'm working with somebody, kind of what our trajectory of therapy is going to be like, because a lot of this, can they acknowledge their own vulnerability? A lot of this speaks to vagal tone. If we want to integrate neuroscience here around resilience, what is your capacity to move in and out? What is your capacity to see your own and see somebody else's? What is your capacity to make something of a difficult moment versus avoid it? So for me, this is kind of an assessment or a rating scale when I'm working with a client and or when I'm thinking about myself in regards to my own history. So yeah, it's a both and for sure.